People love the idea that power just snowballs. One win turns into another, and suddenly the story feels inevitable. Caesar messes with that idea almost immediately. He loses, loudly sometimes, in ways everyone can see. And what's strange is how little it seems to damage him long term. Watch his career closely, and you notice a pattern that feels uncomfortable. After a setback, he doesn't rush to prove anything. He doesn't scramble to fix the story or drown the mistake in noise. He slows the whole situation down, even when that makes people uneasy. Especially then. That instinct didn't appear out of nowhere. Long before the legions and the triumphs, Caesar lived inside pressure. Debt hanging over him, politics turning hostile, powerful men deciding whether he was worth keeping alive. He learned early that panic makes you predictable. Waiting makes everyone else reveal their hand. So later, when battles slip and plans crack, he treats failure like space rather than damage. A gap he can move inside while others rush to close it. Enemies hesitate. Allies second guess. Time stretches. This is where his comebacks begin, in the quiet stretch after loss, when he refuses to hurry and lets pressure shift. Caesar doesn't start his life anywhere near power. He starts exposed. Young, ambitious, buried in debt, tied to political factions that are collapsing in real time. The kind of situation where one wrong reaction doesn't just hurt your pride, but it ends you. And he learns that lesson early, almost too early. When Sulla takes control of Rome, Caesar is on the wrong side of history. Family ties, alliances, past loyalties, all suddenly liabilities. Sulla orders him to divorce Cornelia. Caesar refuses. That decision almost costs him his life. He goes on the run, hides, bribes his way through danger, survives more on luck than strength. Eventually, Sulla spares him, not out of kindness, but of indifference mixed with suspicion. He lets Caesar live and reportedly warns others that there's something dangerous in him. That moment matters. Caesar sees how power actually works. You don't always get crushed when you lose. Sometimes you get watched. Sometimes you get delayed. And in those stretches, the instinct to react fast is the thing that ruins people. Anger draws attention. Desperation exposes weakness. Silence buys time. At the same time, the debt never goes away. Caesar owes obscene amounts of money. Not abstract debt, but personal, reputation-ending debt. Enough that failure in public office would destroy him socially. This forces a strange discipline. He can't afford emotional outbursts. He can't afford moral stands that feel good in the moment. Every move has to keep the future open. This is where his relationship with setbacks is formed. Losing doesn't trigger panic. It triggers calculation. How long can I stay in this position without making it worse? Who gets nervous if I don't react? Who overplays their hand? Later in life, when armies are involved and losses are measured in bodies instead of denarii, that reflex is already there. He's lived through pressure that didn't explode right away. He knows the danger isn't the hit, it's the reaction to it. That's the foundation. Everything that comes later sits on this habit of surviving the uncomfortable middle. One reason setbacks fail to destabilize Caesar lies in how he understands himself over time. His identity never depends on a single achievement or outcome. Victories matter, as do titles and campaigns, yet none of them function as a final proof of who he is. His sense of position stretches across years, which changes how failure registers. A loss becomes a condition to work within rather than a verdict to overcome. This perspective is visible in his own accounts. Successes and reversals appear close together, described with similar restraint. The language does not swell when things go well, nor does it contract when they do not. A tactical mistake reads as movement interrupted, not as collapse. A major success reads as progress, not culmination. The consistency suggests intention rather than temperament. Events are treated as part of an ongoing sequence rather than moments demanding interpretation. Psychologically, this prevents a common distortion. Many people allow setbacks to bleed into identity. The situation stops being external and starts to feel personal. Once that shift occurs, decision-making narrows. Attention drifts toward protecting image, reducing discomfort, and restoring emotional balance. Speed becomes attractive, even when it damages position. Caesar avoids that narrowing by keeping the timeline open. His career is never framed as hinging on the present moment alone. Because the story remains unfinished, pressure stays manageable. There is no requirement to force resolution simply to regain psychological comfort. This also clarifies his emotional restraint following failure. He does not resort to public anger, symbolic punishment, or visible gestures meant to reassert authority. Those responses serve leaders whose legitimacy depends on immediate perception. His legitimacy rests on continuity and the expectation that position remains intact even when circumstances shift. That distance can feel unsettling to others. Leaders who respond this way often seem unreadable, even detached. When tension rises and emotional signals remain muted, uncertainty spreads. Yet uncertainty also preserves flexibility. While others expend energy stabilizing appearances, Caesar keeps attention on sequence, alignment, and how present damage reshapes future options. By the time military losses become significant, this habit is already fixed. Failure does not threaten identity. It supplies information, held without urgency until it becomes useful. After a setback, leaders enter a phase where error becomes more likely. The situation itself may remain workable, yet attention shifts toward reaction. Everyone watches closely, trying to gauge whether control still exists. This pressure operates socially before it does tactically, and it narrows the range of acceptable behavior. Gergovia places Caesar in this position. The failure is visible enough to demand acknowledgement, yet limited enough that the campaign continues. Moments like this invite rapid movement, not because conditions require it, but because audiences expect it. Action reassures. Delay raises questions. Caesar allows the loss to remain unresolved. He neither dramatizes the error nor rushes to overwrite it. The absence of visible correction stabilizes the army. Discipline holds. Attention stays on the situation rather than on internal signaling. The loss exists, but it does not expand. Dyrrhachium recreates the same psychological test under harsher circumstances. Supplies tighten. The opposing side holds structural advantages. A forced attempt to shift the balance fails, and exposure increases. These are conditions where leaders often feel compelled to demonstrate decisiveness to maintain authority. Caesar's response remains consistent. Withdrawal occurs without emotional framing. The movement is treated as positional adjustment rather than something requiring justification or immediate compensation. His focus remains limited to preserving options and cohesion. That restraint alters how the situation is read across the field. Pompey hesitates, not because conditions suddenly favor Caesar, but because the expected behavioral signals never appear. Pressure fails to produce urgency, and uncertainty replaces momentum. In both cases, the losses produce the same internal orientation. They are treated as constraints operating within a longer sequence. Decision-making remains intact because attention never collapses toward relief. Many leaders lose advantage during aftermath, when discomfort drives premature resolution. Caesar tolerates the unresolved state. While others react to what just happened, he adjusts conditions around what may happen next. By the time initiative shifts, the environment has already changed. Over time, restraint stops functioning as damage control and begins shaping outcomes directly. Alesia represents that shift. By this stage, Caesar is no longer managing fallout from earlier mistakes. He is constructing a situation that rewards endurance and penalizes impatience, relying on the assumption that pressure affects people unevenly. The structure of the siege makes this clear. Caesar commits to containment rather than resolution. Two systems of fortifications, one facing the city and one facing outward, require sustained coordination rather than decisive action. The design holds only if pressure can be absorbed without release. Every day that passes tests discipline, logistics, and cohesion. Any attempt to accelerate events risks collapsing the entire arrangement. This approach reflects habits developed earlier. Gergovia shows how momentum can outrun control. Dyrrhachium shows how unresolved exposure can be tolerated without panic. By the time Alesia unfolds, operating inside prolonged tension no longer feels exceptional. It has become familiar terrain. Pharsalus follows the same logic under faster conditions. After Dyrrhachium, circumstances create openings for immediate engagement. Caesar allows time to pass. Pompey holds numerical strength, political legitimacy, and logistical depth. Those advantages also impose pressure. Holding position becomes costly. Delay compounds expectations. The longer nothing happens, the heavier the burden becomes. Time redistributes strain unevenly. One side absorbs it with relative ease, while the other carries mounting obligation. When engagement finally occurs, the conditions have already been shaped by earlier restraint. The battle reflects accumulated positioning rather than momentary initiative. From a psychological perspective, the pattern remains consistent. Time is treated as a manageable variable rather than a diminishing resource. Decisions stay oriented toward position, alignment, and option preservation. Emotional equilibrium never becomes the organizing principle. By the time force enters the equation, outcomes have narrowed. Later victories appear subdued because the decisive movement occurred earlier, during periods when visible change remained minimal. The shift happens quietly, while attention elsewhere remains fixed on action rather than patience. When Caesar's career is viewed as a whole, it stops looking like a sequence of dramatic recoveries and starts looking more restrained. Losses do not trigger sudden reversals or emotional surges. They remain part of the situation long enough to alter how pressure moves through it. Rather than being erased, they quietly reshape what follows. That response explains why setbacks never fully close his options. Time continues to feel workable instead of compressed. While others hurry to restore confidence or stabilize appearances, his attention stays on what still carries leverage and what has not yet settled into permanence. The future remains open because it is never forced into resolution too early. Alesia and Pharsalus only make sense from this angle. They reflect habits formed well before those battles, during periods when restraint felt uncomfortable and patience carried a cost. By the time decisive action occurs, much of the outcome has already been shaped elsewhere. This is the unsettling aspect of his psychology. There is no dramatic turning point to isolate, and no emotional release that signals recovery. Progress unfolds quietly, often mistaken for inaction. He continues operating while others grow restless, misread stillness, or exhaust themselves trying to accelerate events. The broader lesson carries no spectacle. Power does not always announce itself through movement. Sometimes it appears in the person willing to hold position and let time do the revealing. If you want more videos to show up here in the future, subscribing to the channel is the simplest way to do that.